Hey, I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make this floating coat rack. This whole project was made out of 3/4 inch birch plywood. I started by cutting a piece to 36 by 10. Then I cut down some other scraps to 5 inches. I used that piece to set up a stop block so I could accurately cut the end pieces. Then I had to trim down a piece that would fit inside of my box. It'll make sense in just a minute. I dry fit everything together to make sure it was all cut correctly and it fit nice and tight. Then I drew a reference line along the bottom of the shelf. This line showed me the area that it was safe to cut out. I left some space on the sides and then I cut out the area for the French cleat. I trimmed down this piece to make sure that it would fit in that opening once everything was put together, and then I set the blade to a 45-degree angle and basically cut it in half. The wall cleat got cut down to 20 inches to make sure that it would span studs in a wall. I marked locations for biscuits on all the joints, including how the cleat would attach to the top panel. When using a biscuit joiner, you draw a line across the joint that you want. This line acts as a reference point for you to center your biscuit joiner and cut the hole. As long as your cut is centered on that mark, the slots in both pieces of wood should match up just fine. Also, typically there are 3 different sizes, 0, 10, and 20, of biscuits. And those are just different sizes that will fit in different amounts of wood that you happen to be cutting. Once I got all the holes cut, I added glue down inside the biscuit slots and then onto the biscuits themselves. You push the biscuits into the slot and then just set everything together. Biscuit joinery is quick, easy, and it creates hidden joints. With everything glued together, I added some clamps to hold the joints tight while the glue dried. I removed the clamps after it had dried and then did the same process to add the cleat to the back panel. Since there's an angle on the cleat, it's hard to clamp down, but in this case you won't even see it, so I just put in the biscuits, set the cleat in place, and lined up the marks. With that all dry, I flipped it over and added some glue to the back edge. Now my back panel could be set in place and screwed in. I countersunk the holes so the screw heads would set flush with the back, and then screwed it down. Then with it upside down, I added some glue to the exposed pieces and pushed my final piece in to cover up the cleat. I used some really deep clamps to make sure that that back piece was pushed all the way against the cleat. Now it was time for paint. I used some blue painter's tape to mask off the front section along the bottom. I carefully lined up tape with the front of the cubby and then realized that it would make more sense to just put the tape over and trim off the excess flush against the edge with a sharp knife. This was much faster and probably a lot more accurate than doing it by eye. I didn't need a lot of paint for this, but it was a custom color, so I bought a 7-ounce color sample for just a couple of dollars. That's a good way to get a small amount of paint for a very low price. I added 2 coats of this to make sure it was nice and covered, and then removed all the tape. There were a couple of small marks where the paint had gone underneath the tape, and they came off really easily with a sharp knife. I covered the whole thing with 2 coats of polyacrylic and a matte finish. I wanted to add 3 coat hangers, so I found the center point and then split the difference on each side in half. This gave me 3 equal locations to set them in place. I centered them vertically and then used a screw to mark where I should drill the holes. I used a really thin drill bit to pre-drill the holes. The hole is just there to make sure that the screws don't wander when you screw them in. I did the same for the other 2 coat hangers. Then it was all done and ready for install. To install the cleat, I pre-drilled some holes 16 inches apart to match up with studs. Then I found out that they had plaster walls and the studs were not really accessible. I put a screw right through the middle, leveled it out, and then screwed in the edges. Then the shelf just drops down onto the cleat, and you're all done. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you've seen me do floating shelves before, but the French cleat behind this one makes it a little bit more flexible. That gives you the option to slide it left and right and get the placement right without having to change any screws or anything. Also, normally in a floating shelf, the mechanism that actually holds it up is taking up this space, and so by using the French cleat, you end up with a cubby here that you can use. This is great for a kid's room like this, because then you can put trinkets and toys and whatever in here. The addition of the coat hangers just makes it that much more useful, especially in a child's room. This piece was actually designed to match another piece in this room that I didn't make, but I really like the combination of the paint and the plywood. Being able to see all the wood grain on the outside, but then having the really bold color, I think is a nice combo. I hope you liked this one, and if you did, let me know in the comments below or at ILikeToMakeStuff.com. Got a lot of other videos for you to check out here. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.